Hey pals, how are you doing? Do you like dinosaurs? I like dinosaurs, so let's talk about dinosaurs because what else would you talk about? I'm Pal, and today we're gonna meet the dino that made paleontologists climb 4,000 meters at 25 degrees below zero just so they can discover that Elvis was there all along. But before we get into the video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content and don't want to miss any cool dinos in the future. Alright, let's dive in. Cryolophosaurus was a mid-sized theropod that lived in Antarctica during the early Jurassic, more specifically in the Pliensbacken stage, around 190 million years ago. This dino has only one species, Cryolophosaurus elioti, meaning the frozen-crested lizard of Elliot, named by William Hammer, cool name to be a paleontologist by the way, in 1994, who attributed the species to David Elliott, who was the guy who first discovered the Cryolophosaurus remains. As I just mentioned, Cryo was discovered in Antarctica, more precisely on Mount Kirkpatrick, in the Beardmore Glacier, in the middle of the Transantarctic Mountains, which is the mountain range crossing Antarctica from west to southeast. The place Cryo was found is the Hansen Formation, one of the only two major dinosaur-bearing formations in the area, the other being Santa Marta Formation of late Cretaceous age, hosting the famous ankylosaur Antarctopelta, which I might talk about in the future, especially since the recent discovery of one of his relatives, Stegoros, shed new light on his biology. The Hansen Formation sported a rich paleodiversity, with smaller unnamed theropods, the sauropodomorph Glacialisaurus, a dimorphodontid pterosaur, which looked more like this by the way, and not like these atrocities depicted in Jurassic World. To be clear, I'm not the one to spit on the World franchise a lot, but their dimorphodons are criminal, as well as small early mammals and a wide variety of insects and plants. Common remains of the plant Ichnogenus planoletis were found. An ichnogenus is a genus only represented by a trace of an organism and not by a remain of the organism itself, like footsteps, outer cast of a bone, or the markings left by the shape of the plant. Damn, I really have to do a video about the different kinds of fossils, too much to talk about. Planoletis is characteristic of fluvial or lacustrine environment. Another plant, Otozamites, suggests a high percentage of humidity. By the way, I really want to point out that the person working on these plants is named Bonfleur, the last part meaning flower in French, so they're definitely in the right line of work. Based on them, we can assume Cryo lived in a humid environment around the river system, typical of coastal areas near mountainous regions. Overall, the plant remains point to an environment with strong seasonality, perhaps similar to the cool temperate, frost-free forest and open woodlands of northern New Zealand. Residues of burned plants also show that this region was subject to episodes of local volcanism, more specifically Plinian eruptions, which is the type of eruption you do not want to be around when it happens. Just ask the guys at Pompeii, they'll tell you. Hammer and Hickerson, who described Cryo, had to go 4,000 meters in altitude to discover him, who must have looked something like that.
Salut!
We don't often think of high mountains when looking for fossils, but they can surprisingly bear a lot of them, even marine ones. By the way, I don't know about you, but I never imagined Antarctica as being very high. I always have this wrong idea of a very flat, vast, beautiful but boring ice desert. But Antarctica is actually a very mountainous landmass, with an average elevation, and I cannot overstate the average, of around 2,300 meters, being only the fifth country with the highest elevation after countries in the Himalayas like Nepal or Bhutan, and higher than Chile or Peru, with the South Pole sitting at around 2,800 meters. Just so you have some reference points, France and Australia have an average elevation of around 350 meters, USA around 760 meters, and Switzerland around 1,350 meters. So Antarctica is twice as high as Switzerland on average. That's crazy to me. In Antarctica, Cryolophosaurus was only the second dinosaur to be found there. The first one was Antarctopelta. It was also the first carnivorous to be found, and the first non-avian to be officially named. This might come as a surprise, but polar regions had a lot of dinosaurs in the Mesozoic. But bear in mind that their position was quite different from today, and no ice, or at least not as much as today, was present. The climate was still cool and temperate, similar to what is seen in modern Chile, even if inland Antarctica could present much harsher conditions than the coastal areas. The arrangements of the landmasses at the time, still very close to each other because Pangaea just began to split, favored warm ocean currents to go south, which allowed Antarctica to have much more habitable conditions than today. For his time, Cryolophosaurus was one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs, with the holotype, which is the fancy name given to the specimen that gave the species its name, and is usually the first fossil of a species discovered, being around 7 meters long for an estimated weight of around 350 to 400 kilograms. Cross-sections of this Cryolophosaurus bone have revealed growth lines suggesting it was 15 to 17 years old when it died, so probably a subadult that hadn't reached its full size yet. The adult is estimated to be around 8 meters for 800 kilograms. Cryolophosaurus has a decently preserved skeleton, with a skull 50 to 70% complete, making him one of the best understood early Jurassic theropods so far. Maxillary teeth, many vertebrae from most part of the vertebral column, ribs and chevron, the pelvis, and part of the limbs were also found. However, despite all this material, Cryolophosaurus classification is not yet set in stone, as many have tried to put him in slightly different groups since he was first discovered. Indeed, as his full skeleton is not known and not all the bones found have been officially described yet, a full assessment of the morphological characters of Cryolophosaurus cannot be made. And assigning him definitely to one group or another is still conflictual, with some characteristics pointing to a more basal position within Dilophosaurids, for example, with others tending to indicate a more derived position close to Titaneurans, the group including most of the bigger, more advanced theropods. Cryolophosaurus was placed within Allosauroidae, before being placed closer to Dilophosaurus and Dracovenator, before 2020 when Marsh et al. Placed him close to Averostra, a little less derived than Dilophosaurus. His place close to Dilophosaurus is not debated though, he is usually placed around him. This doesn't seem too far-fetched, given the similarity with these other early crested dinosaurs, like, as mentioned, Dilophosaurus, but also Sinosaurus from China and Dracovenator from South Africa. Although you might have noticed that Cryolophosaurus crest is sideways compared to Dilo, Sino or Draco, as it runs across the skull, and not along its length.
Hey, Cryo. Elvis is called. He wants his hair back. Ha ha ha. Seriously, what's wrong with you? Are you stuck in the 50s?
Haha, so funny. By the way, didn't nobody tell you your hairstyle also died 15 years ago with French electro dance tectonic?
Indeed, his characteristic feature, the pompadour crest, ooh, fancy, led a lot of people to call him the Elvis dino. In addition to running across the skull and not along it, it was furrowed, making it look like a Spanish comb, which goes well with the Elvis image. He has the hair and the comb that goes with it all in one. That's a practical dino in my book. This morphological feature probably was too small for defensive or offensive purposes, but most likely used for individual recognition or sexual display. Because if you haven't understood yet, anything unusual sticking out of the body and not used as a weapon is usually means to have sex in one way or another. The crest was perhaps subject to sexual dimorphism, but for now this can only be subject to speculation. Also, it's probable that Cryolophosaurus might have been very colorful. If we take living dinosaurs as an example, we can see that birds that have a bony crest on top of their heads tend to have a lot of colors on the face, like the guinea fowl, the cassowary, the wrinkled hornbill, or the great hornbill. It has been shown that his brain was rather small compared to his size, so he was not that smart. We'll forgive him though, he was still rather early in theropod evolution and already grew to a big size for his time. The fact that he was supposedly not super smart probably was compensated by a gregarious lifestyle, where they lived in groups to improve survival, even though the fossil record doesn't show it yet since only one specimen has been described so far. Cryo was found with the ribs of a supposed prosauropod in his mouth, suggesting he had choked on them. That poor guy. But no, this was later disproved. It was in fact his own ribs.
Wait, did he choke on his own ribs?
No, that's not what I'm saying, you moron. They just had been removed after the death from his ribcage to the skull. Reworking, the process of bones moving around after death, is very common and makes the job of paleontologists very hard to reconstruct how an animal looked like, especially when it's the first time it's being discovered. Imagine finding this. If you don't recognize it, that's the skull of Cryo. You can see his little crest here. Now imagine having this still inside the rocks below hundreds of kilograms of them. And now also imagine having to put it back together like this. Fossil preparators are the unsung heroes of paleontology sometimes, I swear. Anyway, when it comes to his diet, a tooth belonging to a tritylodon, a very early mammal, was also found as part of Cryolophosaurus' stomach content. who probably fed on them. The prosauropod Glacialisaurus roamed this place at the same time as Cryolophosaurus, so he likely preyed on them as well. Since he's rather slender and athletic, Cryolophosaurus likely had an opportunistic behavior and fed on what he could. Unlike our last friend Lyrtosaurus, Cryolophosaurus is much more well known, so he was depicted in a number of medias over the years, like most notably in the Jurassic franchise, Dinosaur King, Primal Carnage, and many others. He's a very charismatic dino, with his extremely recognizable crest, and is a very cool theropod in general. If the movie Jurassic Park was filled with actual Jurassic dinosaurs, Cryolophosaurus definitely would deserve his place there. Antarctica is among the harshest places to go looking for fossils these days, because of the extreme temperatures there, but thanks to its gentler past environmental conditions, it sure witnessed an incredible diversity, of which Cryo was part of, that we most likely still have to discover for the most part. And there's surely plenty more specimens of his friends still hidden under the frozen grounds of Antarctica to unearth. Unfortunately, like the ice caps of Antarctica, everything must come to an end, even this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I did making it. If so, don't hesitate to share, leave a like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and congrats if you made it to this point. Keep paleontologing. I'll see you around. See you, pal.
All you need is just some good fucking music that you have, man.